This is Twisted Passages with award-winning author Marie Sutro. Now, let's take a deep dive into the dark world of psychological thrillers and meet the authors who created them.
Hello, and welcome to Twisted Passages. I'm your host, Marie Sutro, and today we have amazing author of 8 novels, including 2 under a pen name, the amazing Nicci Cloke, here to talk about her newest release, Her Many Faces. Welcome, Nicci.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I am so happy and thankful that you are here today. This book had so many twists and turns and kept me on the edge until the very last sentence. So before I start getting crazy, can you start listeners off with an overview of what the story's about?
Sure. So Her Many Faces is the story of Katie, who is on trial for poisoning 4 very powerful, influential members of the private club where she works. But it's told from the perspective of the 5 men in her life who think they know her best. Her dad, her childhood best friend, her ex, her lawyer, and a journalist who's investigating the case. And they all have a very different idea about who she is and whether she could have done it or not.
When I originally read that synopsis, I was so personally moved by it. I don't know if it was just growing up as a female in the time that I did, but the idea that we would hear a woman's story through these men in her life and not through her and not through any other women, it resonated deep inside of me in a way that I can't exactly express. And I just knew I had to read this story, and wow, did you deliver.
Thank you. That is so nice to hear.
What made you decide to do that, to give us 5 perspectives and have them all be male?
I think I had been wanting for a long time to write a story where the character was told from other people's perspectives. I'd been thinking a lot about nicknames and names that I've had in the past and how those nicknames feel a bit like selves I've left behind. Like I feel fond of them, some of them, like despairing of others, but they don't feel like me anymore. They feel like things I've stepped out of and perhaps stepped into in that time. And when I was thinking about that, I kind of realized that actually most of them were from men in my life, like whether it was romantic, like partners or family or friends, that those nicknames were kind of attached to those, and those relationships felt much more not roles that I was playing, but more that I can kind of see the type of person that I was trying to be to each of those people more than I do with the women in my life. And so that from there, I knew then that that's what I wanted to do with this character.
One of these perspectives being her father. As a child, you're born into their perspective to some degree, and it can change over time, but you're always going to be their baby. And that, as an example, or, someone you're dating, sometimes they make decisions about you at the beginning, and it's kind of hard to divorce them of that as time goes on, right?
Yeah. And I think it's partly because we all have these gaps in our lives, I guess. And so you're looking for someone to fill it, and that person is trying to fill it for you. And it's not a conscious thing, it's a self-conscious thing, but a subconscious thing. But with Katie and her dad, for example, he sees her as this innocent, kind of naive, like sweet little girl. And part of that is about him wanting to protect her, but part of it is about him. Like he needs her to be that because she's his youngest child. The family goes through a lot in the time before the murders. They have a lot of like private trauma and difficult relationships within the family. And so for John, Katie is the one light in his life, the one good thing. And he is putting her into that role rather than her naturally being it. And it's a lot of pressure for her to try and deliver that for him.
And you mentioned a word that kind of screamed out at me, probably into the first quarter of the book.
Okay.
You're giving us different perspectives. And you mentioned the word need for John as the father, what he needs her to be. And as we go through as the reader, you really made us think about how relationships in our lives are so much defined by need. We meet people that we become friends with, and I don't think that we all realize that we walk into most every relationship with a need, and we're trying to fulfill it in different ways. And you give us the journalist perspective. He has needs, probably not as personal, more career-based needs about her, but everybody has something they need from Catherine. And it really made me aware that, we probably all do that and we don't realize it. We don't think we're needy out of the gates, but we kind of want something everywhere, don't we?
Yeah. Even if it's just for that person to fit the way we see the world, like to kind of confirm something we believe. And I guess with Max, the journalist, he has many biases as well because he's had experience with conspiracy theories before, and that is part of Katie's story. And so he already has this bias towards her before he's even heard anything in court. He kind of already has that, and it's a kind of validation that he needs her to fulfill this thing that he understands about the world and maybe people who believe in conspiracy theories, that they're dangerous. And he is unwilling at first to see past that and to ignore what he feels and needs and see the truth.
And it wasn't just names where you explored this, that these names that define us. I'm a big word nerd, and I think probably like most readers and writers are. And one of the things that again stood out, just so many things really, really made me have aha moments in this book. One of those was a word that we use all the time. It's ubiquitous, the pronoun you. Through each of these perspectives, you're telling them in first person perspectives, and each one of them is talking to Catherine. And they keep saying, you did this, you said that, you felt this, you looked this way. And it almost was an exercise in really opening us up as people to how much we do project through the word you. And you see, therapists try to say, well, why don't you look at yourself and emote your feelings, not necessarily what the other person, what your perspectives of what they did. Yeah. And I thought, wow, do you have a therapy background? Like, how did you figure that out? That was so well done.
I don't have a therapy background, but I did do a course, not before this, but before the book before that, where I did a really amazing course called Getting into Character. And it was run by a psychotherapist. So she taught us basic psychotherapy principles, but we all, for the entire week we were there, brought our characters and talked about our characters and how all of these models and different theories would apply to them. And I found that absolutely fascinating. It was so useful. And she was an amazing teacher. And she used to do this thing called Characters on the Couch, where you could go to her office as a character and have a therapy session as a character. And she would write you a report at the end explaining, how your family dynamics and your relationships were playing into the way you're behaving. Just the best money I've ever spent on my writing, ever.
Absolutely incredible. One of the other things you mentioned, conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
That plays a very powerful role in this story because certain people believe in them and certain people don't. Yeah. And it's very interesting because you give us kind of a panoply of theories to contend with as the reader. And some of them, in certain ways, maybe they're innocuous, but a lot of them are really intense and really over the top and really push you to think, how could someone believe this?
Yeah. And actually the inspiration for that came from like a real life thing that happened to me after lockdown. I bought a treadmill, which many people here did, and it broke because it was not designed to be kept in a garage, which is where I was keeping it. And my dad recommended this repair guy he'd met before, and I called him and he came to fix it. He was a really nice guy, really normal, just chatting about like the weather and, showed him the treadmill. He was explaining to me why it was wrong, that I'd been keeping it in this outbuilding and that's why it was broken and blah, blah, blah. And then in the middle of doing this, and while he's got all his tools out and stuff, he turned to me and I think he was talking about how expensive parts were maybe. And he said, well, because there's those three men who control the world. And I was so like taken aback. I said, are there? And he said, yeah. They faked 9/11 and that's where it started. And from there, he just like told me this whole theory about how the war in Ukraine was fake, COVID was fake, just everything. And it was a completely serious conversation. But he was getting more and more angry about it, especially when I told him that I was vaccinated, and he was not happy about that. I just kind of, I think from then, after he'd left my house and I felt safe again, I started noticing it more and more, like hearing people that I know, family, friends, or old school like friends on Facebook, kind of promoting these fake news theories, or saying, someone that I've known for years told me that Joe Biden was someone in a mask, like deadly seriously said that. And I found it really scary, but really fascinating how this was insidiously creeping further and further into mainstream conversation. Some like quite harmless conspiracy theories, but some really harmful ones. And I didn't want to write a whole book about it, but I wanted to use it in this one as a thread, because I'm very interested in the society we're living in, where this is kind of normal now to have alternative news, I think is the phrase.
One of the interesting ways that you presented that topic was you mentioned in your own story lockdown.
Yeah.
And the pandemic.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking to how really profoundly impactful that was. You know, we were all my side of the Atlantic, your side of the Atlantic, everywhere around the globe. Everyone was just trying to deal with it, I think, every day. And we didn't really have a formula or any kind of, you know, set behavior standard for that, or what it would look like. In reflecting upon it, the way that you brought out those issues and how they ended up damaging a lot of people, and why they were open to things that could potentially be unhealthy in their lives. I don't think any government was looking at it and saying, hey, let's have a mental health campaign. Let's have TV ads, phone ads, you name it, explaining what people can do. Like you mentioned the treadmill. That was a healthy thing if you were stuck indoors that would, you know, get you. And I think a lot of us tried to figure out ways. Like for me, we figured out ways to do game night online. But in looking back on it, if that information had been shared and there were more things and more resources for people, I think maybe so many people wouldn't have been lost in it.
Definitely. And I think I can look back now and see the wholesome stuff. Like my brother is a boxer, and he ran these boxing classes on Zoom for loads of us to all do, and we all got fit together and learned like a new skill, but also kind of hung around at the end to all chat on the Zoom, and all that stuff was great. But I also remember in the first lockdown in the UK, I was single at the time and living on my own. And I remember going to see my parents when that lockdown ended, and my dad making me a cup of coffee, and me thinking, no other person has made me like a drink or food for 13 weeks. Like I've had no contact, and luckily, like I've got a close network of friends and family, but that I was still speaking to during that time. But I think if you didn't, it's so isolating. And for Katie in the book and Gabriel, her childhood best friend, they were so young when that happened, that's a really impressionable time to be isolated in that way. And if there is you're seeing a lot of stuff on social media or on the news, and you don't necessarily have the maturity or the filter to kind of work out what's reliable and what's not. And I don't think in that point any of us really had the filter for that, because it was so unprecedented. Then that's when these theories start to really take hold.
I feel like we all wanted to run through that and get out to the other side. And I don't know if, as a species, even because this was a global phenomenon, if we've really gone back and looked at the mess that was all over the floor. I feel like we've just closed the door and walked away from it. And I think it's playing out in so many ways in society, and we're not sure what to do with it because we still don't realize, oh my goodness, we still haven't cleaned the mess on the floor.
Right. And like, I think in the UK, I don't know so much for you guys, but in the UK, our government behaved so badly in some ways. There was like lots of scandals about, you know, the government having parties when we were all locked up, and it damaged trust in a way that hasn't returned yet. And I think if you don't have fundamental trust in the media and the government, then you kind of are very at sea as a society. So I think that is a difficult thing to try and to try and reckon with now.
Your point is so important, because if you look at other times that we've had global issues, really the only thing I can think of is the world wars.
Yeah.
But there was, I think, a sense of discipline in the governments at the time to at least project. Now, in fairness, they didn't have phones on them all the time and people watching them all the time. So were they really perfect? Probably not. But I do think that there was probably a sense of responsibility that was a higher sense and a higher sense of duty than we've seen in modern society.
Yeah, totally.
Coming back to the words and the names and all of this, when you crafted this story, what was the hardest part about it? You've got 5 POVs. You've got a character we get a little taste of her in the beginning. And then again, it's all these other people telling us. What was the hardest thing about this book for you?
I think because it was such a process of discovery with the 5 voices, because I was trying to work out what they sounded like, each of them, and also what each of them thought of Katie, because that was, central to the plot. So not only was I trying to work out their kind of backstories, but I needed their take on hers. And so that was a lot of notes and working around before actually getting into the story itself. And then I guess on a technical level, just trying to make sure their voices were distinct, and that I really wanted not whole scenes to be repeated, but I wanted the reader to see things from more than one character's perspective, just to remind you that what you're hearing isn't necessarily always fully reliable, that it is their biased interpretation of events. But I think you can go too far with that, where it becomes repetitive. So getting the balance where you were seeing enough of those overlapping perspectives, but not too much, was another kind of process of trial and error. Also on a technical level, each time I edited a draft, I would take the voices apart and edit one voice at a time, and then at the end try and put it back together. And so the putting it back together was always the worst part, trying to remember where everything went. But yeah.
One of my favorite things I do want to say about this for readers out there, and really speaks to your high skill level, was that when you were changing perspectives, each time it's just a little bite, a little taste, and your power to develop scenes and emotions in so few words is absolutely brilliant, because these scenes do not rattle on. You do not beat dead horses. You give us what we need, and then you're out of that POV and into the next one. And the story is so propulsive in that way, but the characters are so powerful, and each of the subplots are so powerful.
Thank you. That's the nicest thing to say.
It is the nicest thing to read, let me tell you. Now, I do have a burning question that I have to say it fell to the background, and it was very low on the list as I was reading the book, but it was something I had read in your bio. Okay. And it was still there, I think, underneath all of it, kind of burning away. And then when I finished the book and I had a chance to process all the emotions that you left us with, I have to ask about the gig as an elf, because I'm dying. This woman who is so intuitive, so brilliant at understanding the human mind. Please tell me about the elf situation.
Being a Christmas elf. Yeah, I've done many jobs to support my writing over the years, and that was the hardest by far. So I this was between book 2 and 3, I think, or maybe book 1 and 2, actually. So a while ago. But I'd moved to London. I'd gone off to be a writer, and as all writers find out, it's actually quite hard to make a living as a writer. And so I'd ended up moving back to the village where I grew up and needed a job, but there weren't many jobs around. And there was an advert in the paper for Christmas elves at our local garden centre. I don't know if garden centres are the same in the US as they are in the UK, but in the UK, they tend to be quite big. They'll have like home stuff as well as garden stuff, sometimes like a pet area. This one has, in the winter, an ice rink and a grotto. So it's like quite a fun place to work. But they had decided for the first time ever that they were going to make Santa by appointment only. You couldn't just show up to the grotto. You had to have booked your slot with Santa. But the message had not got out. So when I was doing my shifts as the Q elf, there was various roles as elves. The Q elf was one of the worst. It involved turning away children excited about Christmas hour after hour sending them away because Santa was fully booked for the next 6 weeks.
No.
Miserable. Absolutely miserable.
No. Oh my, you might as well have just told them Santa didn't exist at that point. You were right there, Nicci. That was the next level down.
Destroying the dreams.
Oh my God.
Yeah, bad. It also, I'd imagined in my head, like having a really glamorous elf outfit, you know, like in Elf, like a full elf outfit, but it was not like that. It was not glamorous, and it was cold in the garden centre, so it was a big kind of bulky elf outfit. I spent a lot of it hiding in the toy shop from people that I'd been to school with in my elf hat. It was character building. Let's put it that way.
I bet it was incredible character building. And I have to say, I have spoken to quite a few authors and met quite a few artists. And I don't think anyone has ever earned it the way that you earned it, Nicci, because now I look at the psychology in your psychological thriller and hey, this woman has been there. She's turned away children from Santa.
That's as dark as it gets.
It really is. I mean, I can't imagine much worse. Next time I read the next serial killer novel, murder, torture, I'm just going to be like, wow, this is still not what she did to the kids.
There are kids out there who still hate Christmas because of what I
Oh, yeah, this is going to be carried into future generations. Who knows what our future will look like? So, Nicci, amazing book. Lots of other amazing books that you've written. Where is the best place for your existing fans and future fans to find out what's coming next?
Instagram is my favorite platform at the moment. I'm steering clear of X lately. So I'm at Nicci Cloke on Instagram, and my website is niccicloke.com.
Again, Her Many Faces, such an amazingly wonderful read. I cannot recommend it enough.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicci. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Twisted Passages. We hope to see you next time.